So how does a media guy price his business? High.
Yeah, very high. Yes, there's bound to be a haggle, isn't there? So start high. Well, I guess there's always a tremendous haggle, and I guess the point is the business probably isn't worth what you think it's going to be. You might, or you might dream of what you think the value is. The reality is that the market will decide. Partly, certainly going to help a lot if you've got more than one person interested. That's for sure. There are ways to do it. You can, of course, if you want, elect a price that you'll sell for, and just say that's our number and work your way towards it. And if you can't get it, I guess you hang on and carry on until it's worth it. That's one way to do it. I guess you need to at least figure out to some extent what's enough. It's not a bad place to start from.
When you get down to selling a business, you employ the services of clever people like you guys too, and you speak an awful lot about multiples and ratios and numbers and stats and figures and data, and you get swamped in it. But it's an unbelievably emotional thing, right? It's your baby, probably. It's something you put your heart and soul into, as has already been expressed. And a really good piece of advice on that front actually was making sure the right price suits you emotionally, so that if you feel comfortable, for example, with the initial payout, or indeed what you might be able to achieve overall, then that's arguably the most important thing, because it's something that you're basically happy with and you feel kind of comfortable with. So there's no amount of kind of, adjusting sort of multiples can alter the fact that it has to be something that you like and are comfortable with.
Well, I think we've heard that certain categories, whether it's mobile or social at that moment in time, are enjoying a premium. But I think there are some even more fundamental things that are relevant to whatever part of the market you're in, and that is, the risk profile of a business. I mean, a business that has 40% of its revenues in one client is obviously a real issue. I mean, because if that, God forbid, something happened to that client, and even if what you're doing for that client is wonderful and the service is great, we all know clients change, regime change happens, and things can happen beyond your control. So those things are factors. So I mean, we would look at pie charts. We'd love to look at a pie chart to see what is the biggest exposure to any one client. We'd love to look at a pie chart to see what is the biggest exposure to any one person in the business. So if that person were to leave or go under a bus. So if I say this with greatest respect to some of my colleagues, but if you're starting a new agency and you want to sell it, don't put your name above the door. Create a brand like Holler or Karmarama, because there's actually immediately that creates the notion that there is something that transcends the individuals that go up and down in the elevators, to use an often used analogy. So I think that is a key thing, is that how and if you have decisions on how you develop that business, go towards broadening and diversifying the business rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. Because again, when you get to the spectrum of value, you may have the most wonderful technology that gets you up here, but if everything is dependent on a relationship with Beattie, the value comes back down here.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, I mean, is it gut price or is it fancy formulas?
I think there are lots of fancy formulas involved, but you know what, the truth is the market decides what you're worth. If you've got something that's alluring, and as you said, if there's more than one person interested, then that obviously forces the price up. I think it is about timing and having your moment and making sure that you appreciate that moment when it comes along. But I think one of the key things is not getting too wrapped up in. Well, two things not to get wrapped up in. Number one is that we all have in our minds simple shorthands that make life easier for ourselves. And in this area, the shorthand we have in our minds is what's the multiple. And I think what I learned in our process with B&B was the multiple is a very, very important constituent part of a deal, but it's only one part of the deal. And actually there are other things that can be around it that could either amplify that considerably or not. So in a way, the kind of fixation you come in with on multiple is important, but it's not the only thing to be to kind of consider. And I think the other crucial one is about the kind of jam tomorrow. So you've got to be happy with what you've got, what you're getting paid for that business at that time. Yeah. It can be quite a seductive process. It's a seductive. The baby metaphor is right, but it's someone coming over and saying, "God, your baby's gorgeous," and someone else comes over and says, "Oh my God, I've got to have your baby," and as it were. And no one's ever said that. Even my wife hasn't said that. But it's a really seductive process, and you've got to keep a level of sobriety, I guess, about it, and make sure that you keep yourself anchored, and make sure that what's happening today works for you today, and have a look at the future, but don't rely on it.
Yeah, that's hard. It's really tough because your next payment after the first is going to be dependent on those two coming together and how you actually, and we were given some good advice about kind of forget the numbers, just concentrate on the culture, because if you get the culture wrong of bringing two organisations together, it is a disaster, you know, from day one. And most mergers do fail. There's a lovely quote which kind of is quite kind of fair. You know, if the two coming together is like being airlifted from the Titanic by the Hindenburg, don't fucking do it. Do not do it. I think that's mine. Have a rationale for it. I think every agency and every market kind of gets a hotspot. Then your time comes. Don't miss it, because if you miss that wave, there isn't another one coming. There isn't another one coming. Believe me, there isn't another one coming. And you'll then have to reinvent yourself to go on to the next wave. Right. Don't necessarily rely on the second and third payments. They're hard to get and they're fun to get, and they're the extra bit on the top of it.